August 13th, 2025, the South China Sea. At first light, the waters looked deceptively calm, but every sailor aboard the USS Higgins knew that beneath the surface calm, tension ran deep. The guided missile destroyer was on a freedom of navigation operation tasked with demonstrating that international waters could not be claimed or closed by force. Scarborough Shoal lay just ahead, a reef-turned flashpoint where rival claims had already sparked countless confrontations. Engines thrummed through steel bulkheads, radars swept in steady arcs, and every watchstander carried the quiet knowledge that today could be different. The first warning came as faint blips on the tactical display, small echoes that grew stronger with each sweep. Soon, a Chinese warship broke the horizon. Its sharp silhouette advanced with purpose, broadcasting warnings across open channels. The Higgins was trespassing and must depart immediately. Alarms pulsed, communications crackled, and sailors rushed to stations. Lookouts fixed binoculars on the incoming bow, cutting through the swell. At less than 12 nautical miles, one miscalculation could turn steel against steel and trigger a crisis neither side could easily contain. Yet this was more than a collision course. Scarborough Shoal carries enormous weight in global strategy. For Beijing, it is a symbol of expanding control, an attempt to turn disputed waters into national territory. For Washington, it is a test of principle and resolve, a signal to allies that the United States will not abandon open sea lanes. On this morning, the crew of the Higgins carried more than their own survival. They carried the credibility of American power in Asia. Then came the escalation. The Chinese vessel shifted its course aggressively, edging dangerously close to the destroyer's bow. Radar operators reported additional emissions farther out, signs of more units converging. Overhead, a helicopter lifted from the Chinese deck, circling like a predator. Electronic interference rippled across the Higgins screens, hinting at jamming. The sea itself looked unchanged, calm and steady, but every man and woman aboard felt the invisible noose tightening. What began as a single shadowing maneuver was quickly turning into a coordinated display of force. The Higgins had not fired a shot, yet the pressure mounted with each passing minute. And as new contacts flickered into view, one reality became impossible to ignore. This encounter was only the beginning. The morning of August 13th, 2025, unfolded with deceptive calm across the South China Sea. The guided missile destroyer USS Higgins sailed at a measured pace near the contested waters of Scarborough Shoal, executing a freedom of navigation operation that Washington had long insisted was both lawful and necessary. Its immediate objective was to assert international rights of passage, maintaining presence in one of the world's most disputed maritime corridors. The sea was moderate, visibility stretched for miles, and the sound of turbines echoed in the steel passageways as sailors maintained their routines. Yet tension ran beneath the surface, for the shoal had become a flashpoint where rival claims often collided. On radar screens inside the Combat Information Center, faint returns hinted at approaching contacts. Operators worked methodically, feeding data into the Aegis system that governed tracking and fire control. The task before the crew was simple in principle, but daunting in practice. Hold course under pressure, avoid provocation, and demonstrate that the sea remained open. The appearance of a Chinese warship soon transformed the atmosphere on board. Its silhouette emerged on the horizon, growing larger as it closed the distance, until its angular bow cut through the swell less than a dozen nautical miles away. Alarms sounded, communications sparked to life, and bridge officers coordinated with the combat center to assess intentions. The destroyer's phased array radar locked in a firm track, providing precise bearing, speed, and course of the encroaching vessel. Chinese broadcasts over open channels accused the Higgins of trespassing and demanded withdrawal, language consistent with Beijing's long-standing claims over the shoal. The U.S. crew responded calmly, reiterating their right to operate in international waters, while helm orders adjusted to ensure safe passage, yet maintain the mission profile. At the same time, lookouts visually confirmed the proximity, binoculars trained on the fast-approaching hull as gray water frothed beneath its bow. Every maneuver carried risk, and even the smallest misjudgment could spark collision or escalation. Sailors stationed at the close-in weapon system mount checked readiness, though no weapons release was contemplated at this stage. For several tense minutes, the two ships steamed in near parallel, each testing the resolve of the other. The Higgins held its line, engines humming at steady revolutions, while the Chinese vessel edged dangerously close in what looked less like innocent navigation and more like a deliberate attempt to force a change of course. The tactical display on the American bridge plotted the range shrinking to under 2,000 yards, close enough for any sudden turn to cause disaster. Reports filtered in from the operations room that additional radar emissions had been detected further out to sea, suggesting that more units could be shadowing the encounter. Officers recognized that they were not confronting a lone challenger, but potentially an orchestrated maneuver designed to probe U.S. reaction time. The immediate outcome was avoidance of physical contact, yet the stakes had risen dramatically. As the horizon flickered with new electronic signatures, the crew understood that what came next would test not only seamanship, but the credibility of American naval presence in these contested waters. As the USS Higgins steadied its course, the Chinese vessel to port began to alter its profile. What had started as a parallel shadowing maneuver quickly transformed into aggressive positioning. The ship angled closer, placing itself on a converging course that threatened to cut across the Higgins bow. Officers on the American bridge noted the change instantly, and the tactical display lit with caution symbols as the projected tracks overlapped. Every sailor understood the danger. Collisions at sea can happen in seconds, and in contested waters, even an accident can ignite an international crisis. Scarborough Shoal loomed only a dozen nautical miles away, a shallow reef claimed by Beijing, yet patrolled by Philippine and American forces. The operational objective was now sharpened. The Higgins had to maintain navigational rights without yielding to intimidation, holding position in a corridor where retreat would hand propaganda victory to the adversary. The ocean's rhythm was steady, but on deck, hearts beat faster as the range continued to collapse. The Chinese vessel broadcasted again, its signal sharp and insistent over the maritime frequency. The message repeated demands for immediate departure, punctuated by warnings that further advance would provoke unspecified countermeasures. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Aegis system calculated weapon envelopes and maintained constant track quality, though no order to arm was given. Instead, electronic countermeasures were brought to readiness, ready to interfere with targeting if the situation escalated. Lookouts reported a helicopter lifting from the Chinese deck, rotors chopping the humid air as it circled at low altitude. The presence of airborne surveillance meant that the Higgins was not only being challenged at sea level, but also from above, where cameras and sensors could relay every maneuver. The American destroyer responded with measured precision. The bridge ordered a slight increase in speed to maintain tactical separation while remaining within the operational box defined by higher command. The sound of engines rising reverberated through the hull, matched by the controlled voices of watchstanders confirming bearings and ranges. This was not yet combat, but it was no longer routine navigation either. Tension peaked as the Chinese ship executed a sudden swerve, closing distance to less than 1,000 yards, a move unmistakably designed to intimidate. The Higgins' crew braced for impact, though the helm adjusted smoothly to avoid collision without surrendering right of passage. The close-in weapon system was powered, sensors aligned, and the deck team stood ready, but no weapon was fired. The immediate outcome was survival of the encounter without physical contact. Yet the risk multiplied when new radar pings appeared to the west. Intelligence screens indicated that additional Chinese units might be maneuvering to encircle the destroyer, creating a potential trap within sight of the shoal. Officers exchanged terse acknowledgments, fully aware that the situation had crossed from harassment into active containment. The Higgins had endured the opening move, but the sea itself seemed to grow narrower, as if invisible walls were closing in. The next challenge would not simply test nerves. It would test the full defensive capability of an American warship under deliberate pressure. The Chinese ship's sudden aggression had left no doubt about intent, and on board the USS Higgins, the command team made a decisive shift. The immediate objective was no longer simple navigation through contested waters, but active protection of the ship and crew. Orders rang through the passageways as defensive systems were brought to full readiness. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar operators synchronized their consoles, ensuring that every contact around Scarborough Shoal was clearly tracked. The sea remained deceptively calm, but the air inside the ship carried a sharper edge, thick with the knowledge that one false move could escalate the situation beyond control. Overhead, the helicopter launched from the Chinese vessel maintained a circling orbit, its sensors capturing every detail of the American destroyer's maneuvers. The Higgins commanding officer ordered the ship's MH-60R Seahawk to prepare for launch, providing both surveillance capability and an additional layer of defense against any threat from the air or surface. With the Seahawk airborne, the tactical picture expanded. Its sensors fed live imagery and targeting data back to the destroyer, mapping radar emissions and confirming that at least 2 more Chinese vessels were operating just beyond visual range. The Aegis combat system integrated these inputs, producing a seamless picture that revealed potential encirclement forming around the Higgins. Electronic warfare officers activated countermeasure suites designed to jam hostile targeting radars should they attempt to lock on. Sailors manned the close-in weapon system mounts, their weapons whirring as tracking motors tested movement arcs. On the forward deck, the vertical launch system hatches remained closed, yet the readiness status shifted from passive monitoring to active defense, a silent but unmistakable warning to any observer. Bridge officers maintained steady course and speed, careful to avoid provocative maneuvers while still asserting navigational rights. In the sonar room, technicians reported no submarine activity, a small relief in an already tense standoff. Every layer of defense was now awake, coordinated, and waiting for the next Chinese move. The immediate effect of this escalation was stabilization of the tactical environment. The Higgins had not fired a shot, yet its defensive posture communicated unmistakable resolve. Chinese vessels held distance just outside the danger zone, their own radars sweeping and probing, while the circling helicopter maintained pressure overhead. For the crew, the knowledge that they had prepared every system for action provided reassurance, but it also underscored how narrow the margin had become. One misinterpreted radar lock, one sudden swerve, or one flare from a nervous pilot could ignite a clash between 2 of the world's most powerful navies. Even as the destroyer's sensors displayed stable tracks, a new variable entered the equation. Electronic warfare specialists reported unusual interference patterns, distortions in radar returns that suggested deliberate jamming from an external source. This was no longer simple harassment by surface ships. It was the opening signal of an expanded engagement in the electromagnetic spectrum. The crew braced again, knowing that the confrontation was about to reach another level. The first signs of electronic interference unsettled the calm rhythm of the operations center on radar scopes that had moments before been precise and stable. Faint distortions now spread like ripples across the screen. Technicians quickly confirmed that these were not atmospheric anomalies, but deliberate jamming directed against the USS Higgins. The immediate operational objective shifted once again. The crew had to preserve track quality while remaining alert to any new surface or air contacts that could exploit the disruption. In contested waters, the battle for electromagnetic dominance often determined the outcome even before weapons were fired. The South China Sea's steady swell seemed indifferent to the invisible contest unfolding above it, yet every sailor understood that the ship was entering a more dangerous phase. The Chinese presence had multiplied, and intelligence data suggested coordinated tactics meant to overwhelm American sensors. Holding steady required not only seamanship, but a calculated defense of the ship's digital eyesight. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Aegis system adjusted algorithms to filter the interference. Electronic warfare officers deployed counter-jamming measures, sending bursts of energy to neutralize the enemy's attempt at blinding the radar. At the same time, the airborne MH-60R Seahawk provided a separate data feed, its own sensors less affected by the jamming. The integration of helicopter data into the destroyer's network allowed commanders to maintain a reliable tactical picture. Additional tracks were confirmed, at least 1 more Chinese surface combatant maneuvering in a flanking position, and several unmanned aerial vehicles probing from higher altitude. The destroyer's close-in weapon system mounts were placed on automatic acquisition mode, their sensors searching for any inbound missiles or drones that could emerge from the haze. sailors double-checked the vertical launch system, ensuring readiness to fire if orders came from higher command. The calm but firm cadence of watch officers kept coordination intact, even as pressure mounted with each passing minute. Every action taken by the Higgins was designed to show resolve without firing the first shot. Yet the preparation left no doubt that it could defend itself if required. For a short period, the counter-jamming measures seemed to succeed. Tracks stabilized, and the tactical display regained coherence. Yet just as relief began to spread across the center, the Seahawk's sensors picked up fresh emissions farther east. A new contact had entered the battlespace, possibly a larger Chinese vessel equipped with more powerful electronic warfare suites. Its signals overlapped with the existing jamming, creating a layered effect that forced the crew to reassess their options. The realization struck hard. The destroyer was not facing isolated harassment, but a coordinated escalation designed to tighten pressure. Outside on deck, the sea looked unchanged, yet below decks, the crew felt the environment grow heavier with each report of interference. The Higgins had held steady against aggressive maneuvers and initial electronic attack, but the arrival of a new and stronger adversary meant the confrontation was only deepening. The sailors braced as orders prepared to shift again, aware that the next development could transform the standoff into a fight for survival. The arrival of the larger Chinese vessel marked a dangerous new phase. The USS Higgins now faced multiple surface combatants, a persistent helicopter overhead, and interference saturating the electromagnetic spectrum. For the crew, the operational objective crystallized: prevent encirclement, break through electronic pressure, and preserve freedom of navigation without initiating combat. The destroyer's commanding officer conferred with the tactical action officer inside the Combat Information Center, voices steady but urgent. Scarborough Shoal remained close, and the risks of being boxed in against shallow waters loomed larger with each minute. The sea was deceptively calm, but the tactical map displayed a tightening vice. American sailors knew that any hesitation could allow the adversary to dictate the terms of the confrontation. In the passageways below decks, engineers maintained propulsion readiness, prepared for sudden acceleration if required. Above, lookouts tracked the encroaching ships, binoculars steady despite the weight of the moment. The counterstroke began not with missiles but with information. The MH-60R Seahawk extended its patrol, relaying precise bearings on the flanking vessel and identifying gaps in the electronic barrage. Electronic warfare officers seized the opening, directing counter-jamming bursts that restored clarity to the Aegis system. Suddenly, the radar picture sharpened, displaying clean tracks of every hostile unit in range. With that clarity came action. The commanding officer ordered a change of formation, engines spooling as the Higgins executed a sharp maneuver to widen distance from the shoal and disrupt the attempted encirclement. The ship's movement forced the closest Chinese vessel to alter course, briefly exposing its flank. The Seahawk swooped low, transmitting targeting data that underscored the American ship's ability to respond decisively if threatened. On deck, sailors at the close-in weapon system mounts tracked the helicopters circling above, their systems fully aligned but holding fire. The destroyer had not launched a missile, yet every move signaled that it was regaining tactical initiative. The outcome was immediate and telling. Chinese vessels that had pressed aggressively now steadied their distance, unwilling to push further into a posture that left them exposed. The electronic interference that had clouded the battlespace diminished as the larger vessel's jamming lost its effect against coordinated countermeasures. For the first time in hours, the Higgins held a stable perimeter, able to monitor without distortion and maneuver without obstruction. Relief spread quietly through the ship, but it was tempered by the awareness that the confrontation was not over. A secure moment had been won, not a victory. Analysts aboard recognized that Chinese commanders might adapt, bringing in new assets or shifting to different tactics. The destroyer's officers knew that what followed could still escalate, particularly if secondary threats were waiting beyond radar horizon. As the tactical display steadied, a new contact appeared, faint but deliberate, suggesting that another element was entering the battle space. The tide had turned in favor of the Higgins, but the sea was not finished with its test. What came next promised a final sweep of challenges that could define the outcome of the mission. The new radar contact appeared faint at first, a distant signature on the edge of the tactical display. Yet to the sailors aboard the USS Higgins, it signaled the possibility of a fresh threat entering the battle space. The ship had endured aggressive maneuvering, electronic interference, and attempted encirclement, but now another variable threatened to prolong the standoff. The operational objective was defined with stark clarity. The destroyer needed to identify the new track, ensure it posed no immediate danger, and clear the shoal sector without surrendering navigational rights. The ocean remained deceptively calm, with a haze settling low on the horizon, but every eye aboard the Higgins focused on the evolving contact. The commanding officer reminded the crew that presence alone carried strategic weight. Every mile sailed reinforced the principle of free navigation in international waters. The crew's task was to complete the passage and exit contested seas intact. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Aegis system allocated sensors to sharpen the faint return. Electronic warfare officers adjusted filters to strip away interference, and soon the contact resolved into a clearer image. It was identified as another Chinese surface combatant approaching from the east at measured speed. The pattern revealed intent to shadow rather than ram, but it added to the pressure already weighing on the ship. The Higgins launched another sortie of the MH-60R Seahawk, extending eyes farther across the shoal and confirming that no additional vessels lay hidden beyond the horizon. Data streams from the helicopter confirmed the new vessel's position, allowing the destroyer to chart a course that maintained separation without conceding waters claimed as international. Close-in weapon system mounts remained active, scanning the skies for any inbound drones or missiles, while sonar operators confirmed that the undersea domain remained clear. The ship's engines maintained steady revolutions, and the crew worked in disciplined silence, each action carried out with the knowledge that an entire region was watching. The outcome of this final phase was measured not in missiles fired, but in freedom preserved. The Higgins completed its passage within sight of Scarborough Shoal, refusing to be pushed aside despite days of preparation by Chinese forces. The attempted encirclement had been broken, the jamming countered, and the aggressive shadowing endured. Yet the faint contact that had threatened a new round of escalation ultimately held distance, unwilling to risk direct collision or engagement. As the destroyer moved beyond the contested zone, relief mingled with caution. The crew had succeeded in its immediate mission, but the horizon still shimmered with uncertainty. The Chinese vessels remained behind, their silhouettes fading into the haze, a reminder that the shoal was far from secure. For the Higgins and for the fleet it represented, the operation closed without shots fired, but the tension remained thick. The last radar sweep before leaving the area confirmed the waters clear, but every sailor knew that the next challenge could appear at any time. The sea was quiet once more, yet silence itself carried the weight of an unfinished conflict. The Scarborough Shoal operation showed how quickly a simple naval passage can escalate into a confrontation with global implications. The USS Higgins entered the waters to demonstrate a legal principle, exercising freedom of navigation under international law. Yet the response from Chinese forces transformed that transit into a tense standoff that tested every system, every watchstander, and every decision on board. For hours, the destroyer endured aggressive shadowing, near collision, coordinated jamming, and attempted encirclement. The ship's survival without exchanging fire was not a matter of chance, but the product of rigorous training, calm leadership, and technologies designed for layered defense. What began as a single track on radar became a complex test of resolve between two of the world's most capable navies. The risks were constant. A misinterpreted signal, a radar lock taken as hostile, or a sudden maneuver could have ignited a clash with consequences far beyond the shoal. The Chinese vessels demonstrated coordinated tactics, combining surface presence, electronic warfare, and aerial surveillance to pressure the Higgins. In response, the American destroyer employed countermeasures, helicopters, and steady seamanship to preserve freedom of maneuver. The encounter revealed how modern naval conflict may unfold not in sudden battles, but in drawn-out contests of endurance, where information dominance, electronic control, and positional advantage matter as much as firepower. The Higgins' mission ended without combat, but it exposed the razor's edge on which stability rests in these contested seas. Strategically, the message was unmistakable. Beijing continues to assert dominance over critical waters, and each confrontation tests American credibility and the confidence of allies. For the United States, maintaining presence near Scarborough is not optional. It is essential to the defense of open sea lanes, the reassurance of regional partners, and the preservation of international norms. For the sailors on watch, the lesson is sharper still. Every decision under pressure can prevent or provoke escalation, and discipline at the tactical level carries strategic weight. The shoal remains contested, and the pattern of challenge is unlikely to fade. The incident stands as a reminder that modern war does not always announce itself with gunfire. Sometimes it arrives as a silent radar contact, an unexpected maneuver, or a burst of electronic noise. If you believe stories like this matter, and that we must understand modern war before it happens again, subscribe, like, and comment to support the channel.